This is the 7Artisans 24mm prime f1.8 autofocus, and one of the best value third-party lenses I have seen. Full stop. The look that this lens can give you, the wide angle yet still shallow depth of field, is something really only full frame can pull off, as much as I love crop sensor cameras. And on L-mount cameras like DJI, Blackmagic, and of course Lumix, this is going to be basically the cheapest 24mm prime you can get, which automatically makes this interesting, at least a little bit. We've got a 24mm prime from Lumix and Sigma. Those are 1.8 or 2, those being around $700, $800, $900. Meanwhile, this comes in at just over $300. I've been seeing $330 for the Sony version, but sometimes it goes on sale for $280, which is a crazy, crazy price. But are there any compromises? Well, let's go and try and find some. And so while 7Artisans did send this lens out to me, this is a totally independent review and my own honest thoughts. So first, let's check if there's anything in the build quality here that gives away the price of this lens being about half or less of its competitors. Well, initially, there really isn't anything. Focus, aperture, it's a smooth aperture, but it feels great. There's a custom function button on the side. It's all metal construction and feels basically identical as the other two 7Artisans lenses I've looked at so far, but the compromise here comes in at the back of the lens here, where you can maybe see, I can tell you for sure, there's no weather sealing, and there's no weather sealing anywhere on this lens. So that is one thing that drives the price way down. So yeah, that's a bummer, but kind of understandable. The autofocus is another small hit. Like, while it does have autofocus, the focus pulls, I mean, okay, they feel really smooth and natural and organic, more than most lenses, but it is a little sluggish compared to the other 7Artisans lenses, and it's way slower than the Lumix first-party lenses. So I pretty much would always have the autofocus speed maxed out on this lens. Thankfully, the linear focus works really well for this when manually focusing, and the focus ring, it all feels great to use. And focus breathing when you're doing any kind of focusing is basically zero, which is a nice surprise because the other two I remember were a little bit worse. But let's get into the real kind of hurdle most budget lenses have, which is image quality. So before looking at the charts in the real world, shooting stills, 4K video, I really never noticed any softness in any situation. But when we're testing directly, you can see the center does sharpen up a little bit from 1.8 to 2, but with a wide angle lens, the corners are really what you want to look for. So back to 1.8, you can see the extreme corners do lose a little bit more sharpness than the center, and are actually fairly dark, you know, vignetting there. So going down to 2.8 and especially 5.6 helps a lot. And yeah, 5.6 is basically perfect. Even 2.8 is probably the most I would ever feel like I needed to stop down. Honestly, I use this thing wide open all the time. Something to note, there is also a decent little bit of distortion, which you typically don't see these days, but as a third-party lens, I assume there's not any digital correction going on here, which is kind of just a trend in optical design these days. But for being completely optically corrected, it's not really bad at all, and I didn't ever really super notice it in the real world. What isn't particularly great is the close focus and close focus image quality. It's kind of far away, subjects are a little softer, and have a little bit of ghosting. So yeah, for close-ups of people, great. Smaller objects, it's gonna be a little rough. Definitely not a macro lens by any stretch of the imagination, but it is what it is. Flare might be another sticking point for some people, but for me again, and surprise, surprise, it's something I kind of love. Yeah, there's some glare, some green flare elements when shooting like directly into light sources, and being such a wide angle lens, you can sort of catch strays from all these different angles, but overall, pretty decent performer. Aesthetically, I dig it, even if technically it's only okay. Probably the worst part technically of is the glare when the lights are just out of frame. It seems to come mostly from the vertical axis and not the horizontal sides, but yeah, it is what it is. And the Sunstars are also pretty decent, although while the points are kind of nice, the actual flare elements get really small and bitty and green, and they can look a little intrusive, especially when they're coming in at a weird angle. So yeah, not bad. And as with all of the bokeh and these 7Artisans lenses, it's a little funky, but overall looks great, I think. There's a little bit of outlining and edginess to highlights, especially at longer focal distances when things are only slightly out of focus. And the bokeh on the edges of the frame can have this sort of like triangular kind of pointed shape due to physical vignetting, or probably something in the optical design, which is really easy to see when things are thrown fully out of focus, and at normal distances is more just like a little bit of stretching in those corners. But I'm gonna be honest, overall, I do love the bokeh and its slightly quirky look. And I think that's kind of the theme for these 7Artisans lenses. As I have always been saying, it's kind of like they put, cheap manual focus or vintage lenses, but with modern coatings into autofocus lenses that are way sharper than those vintage or manual focus lenses would have been. It has the build quality, decent autofocus, and sharp image quality of a modern autofocus lens, but with the slightly quirkier flare control, bokeh, relatively uncorrected distortion, and just overall image quality and character. It lets you get those nice cinematic shots that aren't perfectly clinical, while also having the comfort of a modern lens, like with EXIF data and autofocus and all the stuff we talked about. Or even simple stuff like just not having to set your focal length with the IBIS and these Lumix cameras. I think it's just, I don't know, 7Artisans is presented a really unique use case for these lenses for those people who like autofocus but don't like super clinical lenses. And this 24mm from 7Artisans is no exception. So if you are in the market for a wide angle lens, it's not ultra wide angle for, I don't know, vlogging, content creation, weddings, low light, cinematic stuff like music videos and short films. Honestly, I think this is a great option, and I think 7Artisans is slowly kind of taking over my L mount kit one lens at a time, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next. Based on the Instagram page, it's gonna be a 35mm. Send it out, guys. Send it out. The people need to know. And with that 35mm, that's gonna be the whole kit. That's pretty cool. 24 to 85. I don't know. I'm gonna, let me know if you want me to try to borrow some Lumix lenses to really do a full comparison for each set of lenses. Yeah, I guess they'd only be really missing the ultra wide angle lens, but I can get away with slower, no autofocus ultra wide lenses. We're just having a rant at the end here. I'm gonna go. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, all that stuff. So the next one. Jesus.